All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, except there's no ladies present, so good evening, gentlemen. On behalf of the Village of Cary and the Board of Zoning, Planning, and Appeals, I'd like to hereby call this meeting to order on this Thursday, April the 13th, 2023. The time is 7 p.m. We have a quorum of members, and at this time, I'd like to ask our Director of Community Development, Mr. Brian Simmons, to please call the roll.
O'Loughlin? Here. Jasper? Williams?
Here.
Kretschmer? Graziano? Here. Stefani?
Here.
Corey?
Here. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, we invite you to rise with us for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. So before we begin, everyone, I really do want to take a brief moment. One of the members of our committee was recently elected to our village trustees, and I want to congratulate Mr. Anthony Stefani on that achievement. Well done. We're proud of you.
Thank you.
For those of you that don't know, Mr. Stefani is our 8th associate member, and he's done a tremendous job for us, and we've appreciated the great work, Tony, that you've done. And now we're going to have to replace you. But one of the hallmarks of the committee is to try and, adopt best practices. And one of the aspirations, Tony, before you got here, was the idea of this 8th associate member. You were the first one, and you've set the standard and a good one. So thank you very much for the great work. And we hope you won't forget this committee when you're sitting at the same dais in the not-too-distant future.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you.
And the other hallmark of this committee, gentlemen, that I just want to discuss for a second is being transparent. And toward that end, you might remember that our colleague Chris Natz, he resigned his role back at the beginning of the year. And, we're going to be looking around for a replacement. But one of the aspirations the committee had when we started was, wouldn't it be great if this became kind of a training ground and a launch pad for those seeking elected office? And no fewer than 3 of our members in less than 3 years are now sitting as elected officials. So well done. Yeah, well done, and thank you for the great work. And as it relates to being transparent to those that are the petitioner tonight, I'm aware, obviously, that Mr. Simmons had contacted yourself, and I really do want to make sure that I'm public about this because we want to be transparent and ethical on this committee. And Brian and I were going back and forth on this because tonight's meeting, we were worried we would have a quorum, and just so we're clear on what this means, the 8th associate member is unable to vote on a variance, which is part of your application. And as a result, he can ask questions, of course, but he's not able to vote. That's not our rules. That's not something we put in our UDO or Unified Development Ordinance. That's part of this home rule, and that's just part of the deal deck that comes along with getting an 8th associate member. So I wanted to make sure the petitioner was aware of that reality. I'm aware that the conversation took place, but I just wanted to bring it up publicly because we do record the meeting. And so there was no confusion at all. I think you wanted to go forward?
Absolutely.
Okay. So let me just speak to this a little bit further. I know you were in here about 10 months ago. I know you know the process very well, but just to refresh, we're going to ask Mr. Simmons to give us an overview once again of what's changed since we saw each other last time. And then what we'll do is ask some questions perhaps of Mr. Simmons. Then we'll open it up to yourselves. And when you approach the podium, please remember that because it is recorded, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record so people know who's speaking. And once again, members of the ZPA might have some questions for yourself. Then we close it. I think we may have a couple of members here from the public that may want to make comments during the public comments section. That's why you're here. You'll be allowed to do that. And then once we close that portion, members of the ZPA may have some questions amongst themselves about the application. We take a vote. And then obviously the vote gets directed back to the elected officials. And that next meeting, for the record, I think is going to be on May the 2nd.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of the process, just by way of refresher. But there's a couple of items in front of you this evening, one of which is we got to approve some minutes. And then Mr. Simmons actually has an approval for a plat subdivision, which is in front of your application. So if you'll just bear with us a couple of minutes, and then we'll get to your application. So, gentlemen, in your packet, of course, you would have received the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which I'm showing the meeting minutes of February 9th, 2023. You might recall that was for Spartan Boxing and Fitness. And I'm past pattern and practice has been for the last little while, I typically just take a voice vote on this. So those in favor of approving the meeting minutes, yep, please, Mr. Graciano. Of course you did. So, all right, Mr. Graciano, so would you like to correct us on our meeting minutes of February the 9th, 2023?
Good catch. Good catch.
So this may be an opportunity for me to ask Mr. Stefani why he didn't catch that.
That's a good question. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graciano. So with that correction, via voice vote, those are in favor of approving the meeting minutes February 9, 2023, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And once again, Mr. Graciano, you gold star for making the catch. So it. Yes, I do. Yeah. I'll make sure I speak to our Director of Community Development about this after the meeting. The first case, 23 ZPA 03001, this is for Ridgefield Homes LLC, location 106-124 East Main Street. The owner is the Village of Cary, and the request is approval for a plat of subdivision. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Simmons for an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As highlighted, this is for a project that has recently received approval from the village board for the development of 10 row home units on the northeast corner of Route 14 and 2nd Street. As the board is aware, the project received approval from the village board back in December for this project. Originally, the property most recently was purchased by the Village of Cary, and through the zoning process, we've been able to sell it to a developer who is developing the row home project. So the item for review this evening is more from a formality for that project, is to formally create the plat of subdivision for the two building pads that would be constructed there, and then the various easements that would be necessary to serve the property and future residents of that development. Staff has reviewed the plat and believes that it complies with the village's standards for a plat of subdivision and is recommending approval of the same this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Simmons. Gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons?
Am I looking at this correctly, that we're talking about subdividing this into 3 lots?
Yep. 3 lots. So it would be one overall lot that would be the primary lot of record for the entire parcel, and then you would have the lot 1 and lot 2 are the building pads for the 2 proposed buildings. You can.
Outlot 3, as it's labeled here,
Mhm.
does that go all the way around lots 1 and 2?
Yes, so outlot 3 would essentially be the common area for the development. So you would have the driveway, landscaping, and all those improvements would be on outlot 3, which would be the front, rear, and side yards for the proposed development.
Okay.
Yeah. If you see on the plat where it says lot 6, lot 7, that's the existing.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
that part.
Okay.
But I was confused with the outlots and, why we had an outlot. So the intent is that lot 1, or the development on lot 1 could be one owner, development on lot 2 could be another owner, and outlot 3 is common to both?
Outlot 3 would be common to both of those buildings, but lot 1 would be one of the 5-unit buildings, and lot 2 would be another 5-unit. But they both would be owned by potentially owned by the same individual, or the individual units within those would be sold off as well, so you could have 5 individual pieces to this.
Okay, so these are intended to be sold off as units not rented?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions, gentlemen? All right, so hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of the final plat of subdivision for the Richfield Landing subdivision.
So moved. Second.
you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Simmons, please call the roll.
Laughlin?
Yes.
Williams? Graziano?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Corey?
Yes. So, Mr. Simmons, congratulations. All right. So now, at this time, gentlemen, I'm going to call case number 23 ZPA 03002. The petitioner is Vertical Management LLC. The attorney representing is Anthony Rain, Development Director. The attorney is Mr. Smith, and petitioner is Mr. Rain. And this is going to be for the location of 20 Northwest Highway. And we're seeking an amendment to a conditional use for a cannabis dispensary. 2, variance to reduce the required rear yard setback to 0 feet. And 3, a variance to eliminate the buffer yard requirements for a cannabis dispensary along the south property line. And I will turn it over to Mr. Simmons for some in-depth overview of this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the ZPA will recall, this certain development came through the zoning process approximately this time last year and received certain zoning entitlements for the development and operation of a cannabis dispensary in the property. As the board may recall, the property is zoned B3R, which is our fringe business residential district. And there's a long history with the property as far as uses and zoning history for the property, but most recently, the village did approve a text amendment to modify the regulations of the B3R district to allow for cannabis dispensaries as conditional uses, and then approved a conditional use permit for the subject use and variances for the rear yard setback related to that project. Since that time period, the petitioner has obtained the necessary permits for the build-out of the tenant, the proposed use, started construction on that operation, and is significantly through that process currently. However, in the process of obtaining their necessary state licensing for their operation, they've come across an issue that the state is requiring modification to their plans that were approved by the Village of Cary. So the proposal this evening is in relation to a request from one of the state agencies regarding their operation, which was not known at the time that they went through our zoning process last summer. This slide was provided information by the petitioner that highlights the information that's in question from the state as far as requiring a location for to be enclosed, secure for proposed deliveries, and the proposal this evening is simply seeking a variance related to a proposed building addition to add a garage to the back of the building. As you can see on this slide, the original site plan is shown on the left-hand side of the image, and the proposed site plan is shown on the right. So there would be a garage addition approximately 12 feet in width, or 10 feet in width, to the property line, 12 feet in height. That would allow for a vehicle to pull into an area that was originally intended to be paved and utilized for deliveries. Would just be providing a roof over that space. Due to the B3R zoning district, the required setback typically for a property within that district is 0 feet for a lot line. However, since this property does abut next to a residential zone and residential use on the south property line, the setback would actually be the same as what is required within the R2 district, or R2A district is zoned there. So it would be a required 40-foot setback for any structure along that property line. The existing property obviously is a legal nonconforming that exists prior to those code regulations, so the 10-foot existing setback is allowed to remain. However, with the addition that they're proposing and the reduction from 10 feet to 0 feet necessitates a variance that was not contemplated at the time that they went through our zoning process previously. In relation to that, since they're asking for the variance for 0 foot, they're also asking to eliminate the buffer yard requirements for a dispensary that would be required along or adjacent to a residential use. So the buffer yard in this location would be reduced to, or eliminated, so that they would not have to provide any landscaping along the back of the building, because with the 0 foot setback, there would be no room for landscape plant materials. This slide shows both the original approved conditions for the building elevation, looking at the east elevation with the proposed garage addition. The scale has been designed to try to minimize the impacts on adjacent properties. And additionally, the image in the lower left-hand side, you can see the area in question where the addition would be installed. There is a bit of a grade difference between the two properties, so there's a retaining wall and a fence that's on top of that retaining wall. So majority of the 12-foot tall structure would be potentially screened by that 6-foot fence and approximately 2-foot retaining wall. As with all land use decisions that are made within the Village of Cary, the village reviews the guidance within the comprehensive plan, and the downtown Cary strategic plan would apply in this case as well. The property is designated as commercial, and the proposed use or the existing approved use would be appropriate for that designation. Likewise, the downtown strategic plan recommends prioritization for commercial uses within the downtown core and surrounding area to encourage more retail sales and operations within the downtown area. As with any land use decision within the code, for conditional use, there are various standards that need to be met. In this case, it's a minor amendment to the plans that were as approved. The area that is proposed to be enclosed was originally intended to be utilized for deliveries for the business. So the proposed addition is a slight amendment to the plans as originally approved and would be necessary to amend the conditional use in that standpoint. These standards would basically indicate that the use would not substantially diminish or impair values of property within the immediate area, would not endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare of the public, and would not impede the normal orderly development of surrounding property in addition to others. As mentioned, for the landscape requirements, the landscape buffer yard that would be required would be a type C transition area. The plan that's shown on the image here is the one that was approved originally when the project came through, that would provide additional screening for the parking lot with the fence and landscaping that would tie into the existing fence that is located in that rear yard. So those landscaping materials would still be provided as part of this plan. There's no change there. They're just simply looking to eliminate the requirement along the rear of the building for the building addition in the area that was paved originally. Similar to conditional use, there are various standards for variances, which the petitioner has provided a response to within the information you have this evening. The hardship was caused by unique circumstances relating to the land and not the general conditions of the district. Property cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be only used under the standards set out in the title. The relief proposed would not alter the character of the locality in addition to the others listed on the screen. So in ZPA case 23 ZPA 0302, should the ZPA determine that the various standards have been met, in this case, it is recommended the ZPA recommend approval of a motion to the village board to grant a conditional use amendment for a cannabis dispensary with the ancillary infusion, a variance to reduce the rear yard building setback to 0 feet, and a variance to eliminate the buffer yard requirements for a cannabis dispensary along the south property line for the property located at 20 Northwest Highway, subject to the conditions that are listed in your staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the petition, and the petitioner is here to provide additional testimony as well.
So gentlemen, questions for Mr. Simmons?
Yeah, the conditions listed in the staff report, where are those listed? I didn't see any.
So there's two conditions that are in the staff report. First one was all conditions of ordinance 220704 are herein incorporated by reference and shall remain in effect unless otherwise in conflict with any of the following conditions of rule. Yeah, it should be.
Page 6.
Page 6.
Payback, Jim.
Right there.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
It's above the
Yeah. Sorry.
Sorry about
Nope. That's fine. And the second condition, just for reference, as I read the first, is the proposed improvements shall substantially conform to the attached plans and exhibits as part of this petition, prepared by their architectural firm and dated February 24th, 23, except as they may be changed to conform to state and village codes and all conditions of approval. And just for reference, the the original ordinance had 9 conditions of approval as well. That would be incorporated by condition number 1 in this case.
Just out of curiosity, how far is the property line from the house, residential side, south side?
Don't have that.
No.
Just right about 10 feet from
The-
Oh,
to
to
the
the
house.
house? Oh, to the residential house?
Yeah.
Yeah, gentlemen,
Oh.
forgive me, so we'll come to that, but you know it's being recorded, so thank you.
I didn't see any public comment back, any notes to you, emails to you.
No, we did not receive, the village did not receive any feedback regarding the petition.
State mandate, that's what we're getting?
Correct.
Because I don't see him, I haven't seen it anywhere else. And I'll get to the questions with you guys, I guess, directing them over here first. This, the one at the old Culvers doesn't have a drive-up garage.
Correct.
So-
I have the similar questions for the petitioner, and the petitioner can provide more
Okay.
information on that. My understanding and what's been relayed to me is it's related to the infusion
Ah.
operation and delivery of those
Okay.
products that would be at this
Gotcha.
facility.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that, most of my questions were regarding that. I figured they'd answer.
But maybe I could pick up on that theme, is that as it relates to the state license requirement, if I'm reading the report correctly, this requirement came in after the fact, and do we have that statute in part of the packet or the date that this occurred? Because my general recollection is that the petitioner came forward, meeting was around June of '22. So was this known in June of '22 when this was first requested, or are we going to be deferring to the petitioner to answer that?
I'd have the petitioner provide that
Yeah,
information.
okay. And then the second question, Mr. Simmons, is the garage itself, it looks tight.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand, what we're saying fits in there, because it's tight. Is that another,
Yeah, it's, the garage is, it's limited space that was originally intended for deliveries. It's a small passenger vehicle would be making deliveries. It's not like a box trucks or those type of vehicle that would be pulling in there. So a regular vehicle that would be able to pull into a regular residential garage would be that space. With the width of the garage, I believe, is 8 feet width, which is a typical residential.
yeah, okay.
And I didn't see it on there, but what's the height of the building-ish? Like,
The overall height, sorry.
The current
next
building.
I think it was 12 feet.
was it
right?
12? All right.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
so
So it's
the-
lower, right.
Yeah, so it's not as high as the rest of the
Yep.
existing building. The overall height of the addition would be 12 feet, and the garage door would have a height of 10 feet.
Got it.
In the statute, does it require a garage door?
It's the definition for an enclosed space, and that's where the petitioner can provide more information as far as the discussions they've had with the state and the different licensing agencies, as far as what the interpretation of enclosed means. And that's where this issue has come up, is the two agencies' response to that same language.
Got it.
And then, Mr. Simmons, just again, so I'm being transparent, was this reviewed by the fire department because of the zero lot setback? And was there any feedback from the fire department?
Yes, we provided the plans to the fire prevention district. They had no issues with the proposed setback. Other comments they had were just typical building comments for any structure that's proposed.
Very good, thank you very much.
One last question. Is this addition, is it going to end up enclosing that door? So to enter that back door, you have to go through the garage to get to the back of the building?
Yes.
Is that what, okay.
Yep.
Are they going to be required to put in another exit door on the exterior or no?
Depending on exiting for the building,
Yeah.
there may be requirements for exiting to get out of the space. That would be a building code requirement.
All right, gentlemen, before I turn it over to the petitioner, any other questions for Mr. Simmons? All right, so what we'll do, gentlemen, is that we'll ask you if you want to incorporate any additional color or comments to the application that you think is appropriate. I know you probably have a presentation you'd like to make. You're welcome to do that. And as we mentioned earlier, if you wouldn't mind just stating your name for the record and your address, and then we'll move forward, okay? Thank you very much.
My name is Patrick Smith. For the record, my residential address is 1565 Matthew Drive in Algonquin. I am counsel for vertical management. With me today is Mr. David Scott, principal, and Mr. Anthony Ryan, their development director. They can answer some additional technical questions you may have, but I think we'll cover a lot of ground with just a few statements by way of clarification. The why we're here is it's a little more nuanced, I think, than was caught with the answers before. The Illinois Administrative Code section that deals with the enclosed delivery area actually itself has not changed in quite some time. Most dispensaries are principally regulated by the Illinois Department of Professional and Financial Regulation. Some who follow the same business model as we do, who are craft dispensaries, where we actually create fresh products in small batches to sell for control and quality, also have an infusion element to them. And when there's an infusion element involved, the IDFPR defers comments over to the Illinois Department of Agriculture. Much like agriculture has something to say about the meat in the back of Jewel, they get a chance to say something about dispensaries that have infusion kitchens that are adjunct to their use. So our use is a little different, for instance, than the Crystal Lake or even the Lake in the Hills use, whereas we are buying fresh products, even regulated products, and creating small batch, fresh resale products. They're buying prepackaged products and simply reselling them. So the Department of Agriculture doesn't have an opportunity to chime in. I guess a metaphor in Cary would be, we are Spirit Water and they are aisles 12 and 13 of Jewel, okay? And that's our model. That's in fact one of the benefits that we offer. So there's been some shuffling at the Department of Agriculture. When we went through the due diligence, we made sure the building itself was compliant with the regulation and the expectation of I always mix this up, Department of Professional and Financial Regulation. You will note that the language there actually probably seems pretty familiar to you, because it's substantially the same language that this village and most villages use to describe how you have to enclose dumpsters at commercial properties, right? And nobody on the planet thinks a dumpster needs to be in a covered garage. Similarly, the Department of Professional and Financial Regulation does not believe our delivery area needs to be in a covered garage, just needs to be secure and closed off from the public, which we had made arrangements for. I think we discussed that in our original zoning petition about the fencing, the security, and how we were going to handle it. So it was a bit of a curveball on that second review to have the new folks at Agriculture say, well, we read it differently. So it's the same code, and they're working from the same rule book, but two separate agencies have a different opinion on what that means. Now, we obviously disagree with Agriculture, and we think our plan was compliant, as do the principal reviewers think it was compliant. But they're state agencies, they're not going to pit themselves against each other. The answer turns out to be conform with the most restrictive requirement that anybody hands you, and don't fight City Hall. So here we are. We're about $1.4 million into the building so far, 80% done. Much more will go in before it's operational. There's been a great investment. I can assure you that my clients would like to avoid the additional cost of a garage if they could. And they also believe that their plan as it exists is compliant. But from a responsibility perspective, we can't argue with the fact that a garage will be more secure to the public than even a tall fenced-in area with cameras. And although we don't anticipate anybody's going to come into that area and try and steal product as it's being unloaded or unloaded, we can't argue with the logic that a closed garage is a safer place to do that in. And so provided the village agrees, my client's happy to go through the extra effort and the extra expense to construct that facility. Couple of quick questions that I can answer that came up before. You may recall from our original presentation, we had the question about what would actually fit back there even when it wasn't a garage. Our proposal to the state that we handed off to the village as well calls for us using a hybrid vehicle. At the time, we thought it was going to be a Prius. May still be a Prius. Hasn't been purchased yet, pending this. But it's not going to be, there's no semi-trucks coming kind of in and out of that area. We've also gone to the effort of trying to minimize the impact and setting it in a particular location where even kind of coming around the curve, it's invisible to the neighborhood. You may recall from the photo in the overhead, if you stand there and you look down through the B3R district, you see a lot of houses that have garages which are substantially built to the property lines. And so while we don't think it changes the essential neighborhood characteristics, the more we could make it entirely invisible to the public, we thought the better off we would be. So that's how we got from where we were when we last met to today. Again, the petitioner is here and their development director. If you have technical questions about how the space would be used, I'd be happy to take my seat and let them answer those. Or if you have questions for me about the process of how we got here, I'm happy to answer those as well.
So why don't we begin with yourself? Perhaps the gentlemen have questions for yourself about the process.
Just to be clear, you said you're $1.4 million into it already? Well, just out of curiosity, what have you guys done that's $1.4 million?
The entire interior was gutted down to less than the floor. Some of that was even ground away and rebuilt.
Okay.
It's entirely rebuilt on the interior.
I'm just trying, I understand, I can sense what you're saying, pegging A against B. So you're making it in there. So the delivery, so what's going in the vehicle that has to be enclosed?
So
That's
for us,
different, that's different from the other
food-
place.
Yeah, okay.
Because I know
So
you're making it
we're
there.
We're bringing, in
Is it
total.
the ingredients?
In total, nothing.
Not
We're
the-
bringing it in component ingredients. So CBD oil and foodstuffs, as opposed to bringing
Flour
in
and milk
already
and-
infused
okay.
foodstuffs. So in total, there is no difference. The difference is that if we were bringing in pre-made foodstuffs, then one agency didn't have a voice and there wasn't going to be a conflict of opinion over the same
And this
language.
is just a informational grab. So restaurants, fast food places who are having stuff delivered food-wise,
Mhm.
but obviously they don't have an enclosed place that it's
Mm-mm.
being delivered.
No.
Because just trying to understand the different.
It's entirely unique to the Cannabis Act.
As we're venturing down this wild west
Sure.
of stuff.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
I mean,
Yeah,
even
but-
banks aren't required to have.
But do they
enclosed,
though?
right?
Your loading docks? I mean, if you think about that, or if you go to you talk to McDonald's, they have to load it all in the back, right?
I watched Cisco drive into a parking lot in Regal Cinema, deliver it off the truck and walk it
Mm.
in. So I don't know, I mean, they're coming in the back door, but
Yeah.
it's not enclosed and. Yeah, it's just, they have a lot bigger trucks too. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I'm just trying to understand the.
Well, it's a really important question, so I know we're talking about kind of your role in this, Mr. Smith, and then maybe this is more of a infusion question, but I think I don't want to speak for you, but I think the question that you're trying to ask is, why is that substance so critical to enclose it in a structure, and why is it so different than someplace else?
Yeah, I mean, I understand your analogy, which is great. Like, it's already pre-made, so it's wrapped and done. I mean, you're, I guess, coming, for lack of better analogy, like just bags that aren't sealed. Like, I don't know the correct, how it's coming and all that information, but
Yeah.
like, to me, it just seems a little bit overkill. Obviously, I'm sure you're getting that too, but,
From a security perspective, it's not any more safe to have a garage roof or no garage roof if you're delivering infused brownies and somebody's gonna leap a fence and try and hold you up than if you're delivering brownies and CBD oil or cannabis oil separately, right? I mean, it's the same security risk. Literally, I can't tell you that there's a distinction because fundamentally we don't believe there's a real distinction. The problem is political.
So it's not being made on site, you're having it made somewhere else?
No, we're making it on site.
You're making it on site? Yep.
Which is the
So-
only reason that agriculture is given the opportunity to opine on what the language means. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe we could kind of continue that theme just for a second, Mr. Smith. So help us understand the mechanics of this. You're asking for a garage to be built. Make believe I'm the driver. I'm driving these ingredients into your facility. Is it my job to close your garage door? How does the process going to work? Or is that a technical question for the people that are working there? Or what-
So it's a self-triggered closing mechanism for the vehicle when it enters the unloading area. The open garage door goes down, right? So it doesn't require you to get out of the car. It doesn't require you to press a button to have the garage door go down. So there's not going to be transport from the vehicle to the building in an open garage, let's say.
You
I
cannot
think that's
do
the
that.
question you were asking, right? Is what triggers the garage to close?
Well, I think that's my question, is that if they're requiring a garage, and for some reason it's a very hot day, and whoever's me driving the car, I'm like, I'm not gonna close the garage, it's too hot.
Yeah.
You know, is that technically out of bounds as far as the agriculture guys are concerned?
You know, I got to tell you, that question has never come up. And if you'd like a job at agriculture, I will write the letter of recommendation, but
Well,
it's never,
maybe I'll come-
they've never raised it as an issue.
Right.
You know, the gate originally was going to be a secured gate as well in the same fashion, right? For the same reasons. And that satisfied IDFPR.
I'm assuming if they're asking you to build a garage, they're asking for security, so I would assume part of the security would say the car's in the garage is closed, you can't take the substance out until the garage is closed. I would assume that's their rules. I'm not speaking for them.
They have not gone that far in the weeds.
Okay. So maybe I can back up, Mr. Smith, a little bit, because I have to admit that I was confused until you presented on things have evolved, people change in organizations. I can understand that. Could you just take us through again the rules of engagement with agriculture and what has changed in their interpretation for requiring you to build a garage?
So when we started the due diligence on this project, everybody was working from the same interpretation of that code language that professional and financial regulation was working from, which was an enclosed secure space is essentially something that's fenced in and is monitored, right? So in our case, we had the perimeter fence, back fence, and then the front gate fencing, gate and fence combination, and that created the security perimeter that was sufficient.
Right.
Okay. It's difficult to say when agriculture shifted gears officially on what a secure area means and admitted that their definition was different than the other agency's definition. It percolated up pretty slowly. I watched these things closely, and I can't tell you precisely when they made the shift. It's been a few months because we initially tried to, I guess, get them to agree with each other out of common sense. And professional and financial regulation took some steps to try and get us to that point, but there's only so far that a bureaucracy on that side will go sometimes, or at least it seemed to us. There's only so far that we go.
When did you get notified? 2 months ago, or?
Let me see. I think it was in 2023 when they first gave us their comments about the garage, end of January? February of 2023, but it would have been early February of 2023 when that comment first came in. And we spent substantial amount of time, again, trying to massage the system because it didn't seem like the same code section should be used to require two separate conditions.
And just so we're all clear, when they changed gears, using your language, did they provide in writing why they were making that requirement to yourselves?
It was a plan review comment out of the blue. So no, it had no justification language. And plan review comments don't generally come with, they come with not compliant for this reason, must have that. They generally don't have, they're not doctrinaire. They don't have that kind of information from them.
Okay. All right. Mr. Williams?
One more question. Back to the Spirit Water Jewel.
Mhm.
Your product that's coming in, how is it coming in different? Meaning like I'm trying to understand why they think it's different. Is it coming in like garbage bags that's out? Or
No,
I'm just
no.
understanding.
It's just a different agencies.
Right.
It's
But-
not,
But is there a difference in how your product is coming in because you're using it to make something versus an immediate sell? So what is the difference in it is it, ingredients are coming in essentially instead of a bag of something.
mhm.
So that's the big difference. I'm guessing that's the difference. And
Yeah.
so, okay.
Right.
But I
mean,
think-
it's not less secure packaging, right?
Right,
It's the
that's
same
what I'm
shipping,
trying to-
packaging, and transport packaging. We are simply not bringing in boxes of, let's say, lollipops, right?
Yeah.
We are bringing in
The sugar.
boxes of lollipops, or the stuff to make lollipops, and then we're bringing in the cannabis.
Maybe I can be a little bit more specific here. You're abutting a residential neighborhood, as you well know. I can't speak for agriculture, but if a child were to get these substances that you're infusing, I'm assuming they're not good for children.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So could you, I know you're not subject matter expert on this, nor am I. I think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Williams, but I think we're trying to understand what is in the infusion that's creating this concern with agriculture. There must be an ingredient in there that they're requiring you to have a garage.
I
to
don't
secure these.
think that you can, I don't agree that you can make that supposition. I don't think that is a required logical step to make. I don't
Here's-
think you can, I don't think you can say that their interpretation of the code is based on a belief that there is something inherently different or dangerous. It can just be a difference of interpretation of the language, which
All right.
is
I'll
every
accept that.
indication we've got.
No, I'll accept that, Mr. Smith, but I think, and again, I don't want to, I think we're trying to understand what it is that's so sensitive in the infusion that we're saying you're shopping at Jewel, you're going to Spirit Water, something's different.
No, I hear you,
Yeah, yeah.
because logically you think there must be a reason why their requirement is more stringent.
I think that what we're getting at here, guys, is that they're bringing in raw materials, and that they're cooking them there.
Right.
That trips agriculture, whereas everybody else is bringing in baggies of gummies,
Pre-made.
pre-made, already done, sealed, ready for
Lollipops,
resale.
yeah.
They're just bringing them in for resale.
Yeah.
But because they're bringing them in, bring in cannabis in a bag,
For secondary.
for secondary,
Yeah.
for secondary infusion, sounds like a big word. Baking is what infusion means, really. So I think where agriculture gets involved is because you're bringing in a bag of cannabis to then bake it on site into a brownie, into a lollipop, into a
Yeah.
whatever they're making out of it. And that's where I think agriculture gets involved, is because you're bringing in raw product.
Yeah.
And to petitioner, would that be an accurate statement from that standpoint?
And are there other, obviously, places that are required? I don't know if there's other places that are doing infused stuff in-house?
Not in this region.
Okay, because that obviously
Yeah.
would have triggered something.
And again, this is kind of this is the petitioner's unique selling proposition, right? I mean, this is kind of the reason to be distinct.
Okay. No, I'm good. I just, probably the same place, just trying to understand why there's a unique difference.
Some of it is inexplicable even to us.
Just out of curiosity, are we looking to expand into like selling to other providers out there as well, as individuals?
Other companies?
Yes. Or are we
think so. I
keeping
think
this
we're looking
in-house?
to-
Because you seem to be the only one in the area that's doing it. That's,
No, go ahead. Yeah, I think you have to state your name for the record.
Hey guys, my name's Anthony Ryan for the record, 708 East Main Street Road, Cary.
Thank you.
So the primary focus is to provide our infused products out of our own retail center. In the event that we have excess chocolate bars or what have you, we have the right to wholesale to third-party license holders. But the primary purpose and focus is to supply our own needs in-house.
Mr. Ryan, just a quick question. So from a standpoint of a vehicle comes to this property to make a delivery, the driver is not getting out of the car or delivery vehicle to notify anybody inside the building? Can you just kind of describe the operation of somebody pulling in with the delivery and how that would work from accessing the property and
Sure.
accessing the garage?
So what we've discussed is having the hardware that would allow for automation when it comes to opening and closing of that garage feature. My understanding is that there will not be the ability to intake raw products with the garage open, so that will in fact need to be closed. There will be coordination with management, what they call an agent in charge for any type of orders that are inbound and coming in, and that'll be intercepted at that side door. That side door is actually a secure vault with 360 diamond plating and a secured corridor to where the product will be able to go into basically an airlock exchange room and then be securely intaken into the vault and weighed out or whatnot. So pretty much authorized vehicle that has technology that will allow it to pull into the garage, shut, and then enter the building without having to go into a parking lot or go into anywhere except a secure zone.
There's no delay for the vehicle waiting on the property to get into the space. As soon as they access the property, that garage door would almost immediately.
It'd be immediate,
leave
yep.
open, they pull in,
Yep.
they park in there to close immediately,
Yep.
and then it would be secure, almost
Yes.
instantaneously accessing the property.
Yes, and then as far as the difference of products or whatnot, cannabis is cannabis, whether it's prepackaged and ready for the consumer or it's going into a brownie or what have you. It's just the different interpretation between the agencies of what they're requiring.
Can I follow on to Mr. Simmons' question? So I just want to make sure I'm clear. You're in the garage is closed. We're working together. Are you coming out of the facility to pick up the ingredients? Is that the process?
No, so there's actually a secure zone. Staff that is going to be transporting will also work for vertical. So they're going to have agent cards to transport as well as work at the dispensary as well as infuse. There's a 24-inch monitor on the interior of the building adjacent to the door that is built into that garage. And so I myself, as the agent in charge, development director, will be aware of any type of intake that's coming in. I'll be able to see it actually coming in from inside the building. And once they're in, there's going to be actually a restricted access keypad to which the authorized agent will be able to put in their code and then enter it into that secured zone where they'll be intercepted by somebody like myself. Right into that vault area is basically a GMP type area, epoxy floor, stainless steel desk with our computer to be able to intake it immediately and log it into the state tracking system.
So where I was going with this is the driver is staying stationary in the car. Is that correct?
No, the driver will have the permission to actually go into the building.
Okay.
It's
so-
one of our employees. I mean,
Well, that's what I was gonna jump in. So you mentioned Prius, so this, you're not having like Amazon come and deliver. You're having your own employee pick up from a location and bring it back. So it's gonna be an employee of the building. So they'll have access. So it's not a third party that's gonna be delivering.
Yeah, where I was going with this, Mr. Williams, is that, make believe I'm the driver, just for the analogy, and there's an emergency, and you're saying that there's a process to lower the garage, and there's an emergency. So who's controlling that garage to open in the event that there's an emergency?
well, in the event there's emergency, we'll have to have some level of, there's going to be there's a door on the back part so that you can exit through there.
Right.
But I imagine code would require some type of emergency ability to get out of there swiftly. I would think probably typically a push panic button on the back door would be sufficient in the event of an emergency. The architect actually addressed code and acknowledge that there's gonna need to be a swift ability to exit in the event of an emergency, and I believe he accommodated that in the drawings with a rear exit door.
That would be certainly something that we'd review as part of the building permit to verify that fire is comfortable with the operation of the space, if fire or something break out, that there's a need to get out of the space.
I spoke to Scott from Fire a couple days ago, and he was familiar with the process and said he didn't have any issue with what we were doing.
Okay. So other questions, gentlemen, from the petitioner?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so if we don't have any other questions for the petitioner, this is the time of the meeting where we would open it up for public comment. I'm not sure if there's anyone here that would like to speak about the petition. So hearing none, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. So gentlemen, before I call the motion, do you have any additional questions that you'd like to review?
My only comment would be, I'm trying to picture an 8-foot garage and being able to get out and move around in there, because I can't move around in my
It's
garage.
tight.
That's 16 feet wide.
No, it's tight. It's tight. There's no question about that.
Not that I have a problem, just good luck to them.
All right, so the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a conditional use amendment for a cannabis dispensary with ancillary infusion and variances to the cannabis land use screening requirements along the southern property line and reduction in the rear building setback to 0 feet for the property located at 20 Northwest Highway, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, and I believe Mr. Simmons actually articulated those, but I'm going to read them into the record just so there's no confusion. Number 1, all conditions of the ordinance, number 022-0704, are herein incorporated by reference and shall remain in effect unless otherwise in conflict with any of the following conditions of approval. 2, proposed approvals shall substantially conform to the attached plans and exhibits as part of this petition, prepared by Penske Architects and dated February 24th, 2023, except as they may be changed to conform to state and village codes in all conditions of approval.
So moved.
Second.
Comment?
Oh, please.
Should we be separating these since Mr. Stefani cannot vote on the variance?
That's the discretion of the committee. Typically, historically, Mr. Graciano, we've been trying to call the motion all at once.
I understand
yeah.
that, but we've got 2 separate motions with 2 separate voting bodies.
Agreed. So that'll be the discretion of the committee. So I think what I'm hearing is Mr. Graciano's proposing that we split the motion and vote on, one would be, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the motion and second are from O'Laughlin and Williams, sorry, Mark says Graziano, for the approval of the conditional use to begin with.
Yep.
That would be the first vote.
Yeah.
And then, I'm assuming the second motion, and second for the variances as well,
Yep,
for the 2 variances.
that's fine.
That's fine.
Okay, so, just speaking out loud, gentlemen, I think the way I'll do this is that I'll just use basically the first 2 sentences for the first motion. But before we go there, I just want to make sure that everyone is in agreement with Mr. Graciano's recommendation that we're splitting the motion in 2 separate votes.
I'm fine with it.
I don't think it changes anything much.
Well, what it changes, of course, is
Well, yeah, I mean, it's,
Mr.
we're
Stefani
going by
can
the
vote
rule
on
book.
this.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we're clear. Okay, so we're in agreement there. So the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees approval of a conditional use amendment for a cannabis dispensary with ancillary infusion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Simmons, would you call the roll?
O'Laughlin,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Graziano,
Yes,
Stefani,
Yes.
Corey.
No. Okay, now the second one is going to be for the variances, and this would be one that obviously Mr. Stefani is unable to vote on because of the 8th associate member role. So the chair will entertain a motion to recommend to the Village Board of Trustees variances to the cannabis land use screening requirements along the southern property line and reduction in the rear building setback to 0 feet for the property located at 20 Northwest Highway, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report that were previously articulated.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Simmons, call the roll.
O'Laughlin,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Graziano,
Yes.
Corey.
No. So on the first motion, you have a positive recommendation to the petitioner. On the second motion, which was for the variances, you need 4 positive votes. So the way this works now, Mr. Smith, and to the petitioners, is that this is delivered back to the elected officials. On the second part of this, just so we're being transparent, you require a supermajority by the elected officials to supersede that vote. That's the way the process would work. So I want to thank you again for your professionalism, for your preparation. I know you might be leaving here not with the answers that you were looking for. But I think the next meeting with Mr. Simmons and the elected officials, which would include now Mr. Stefani, will be on the 2nd of May for your own planning, assuming that that's what's going to transpire.
Yep, I'll go with
Yeah.
May 2nd.
Okay. All right, so before we conclude, gentlemen, I was double-checking with Mr. Simmons about future cases, because I know some of you got some traveling coming up, as I do. So we're going to double-check right now to see if we have any cases coming up for the month of May.
I have no pending zoning cases that have been submitted at this time, so I know there's one that received contact from an individual, but that may not go until June at this point. So more than likely, we will not have a meeting.
Okay. Thank
Okay.
you very much. So, gentlemen, before we conclude, any other comments that you'd like to review? Maybe I'll close with, again, congratulations. to
Yeah,
Mr.
congratulations.
Stefani. Well
Thank
done.
you.
And, you know, if you do see Mr. Nats around, he did serve us well here on this committee. So I've thanked him personally, but if you see him, he had a scheduling commitment that he had been kind of not achieving, and he had made a commitment to someone that he wanted to continue to help them. So we'll wish him continued success in his new capacity. And with that, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. All right. Good luck with everything, Tony. So this goes over.